So the last topic that we're going to cover is mutualism. This is a case where both species in the interaction benefit in some way in terms of fitness. So those components are survival, reproduction, etc. Pollination is one of the most important kinds of mutualisms that there are, and humans benefit quite a bit from this mutualism as well. You could almost say that we're parasites on this mutualism. Now, pollination is plant sex. This is the way that most plants reproduce. Now, not all plants are pollinated by insects or animals like bats, but many of them are. And so in the case of this hummingbird visiting this flower, the hummingbird is a mutualist with that plant that has the flower. It's important to think about what both parties get in this interaction. So the hummingbird is getting nectar to drink, which is high in sugar, very good energy source, and what the plant is getting is reproduction. The bat up above is pollinating that cactus, and the bat is eating pollen and also drinking nectar. The cactus gets reproduction. The bee here is gathering pollen that it will feed to its offspring, but it's also drinking nectar from the flowers. So again, the bee is getting food for itself or for its offspring, and the flower is getting reproduction. Both parties benefit, but it's important to keep track of what the benefit is for each species. This is reproduction. And I'm making a big deal out of that because there's also dispersal. This is not dispersal. That's a different kind of mutualism. We'll get to that in a little bit, but for now I want you to remember that the world is not necessarily made for humans. In fact, many of the adaptations that species have are sort of irrelevant to humans. It's just that we are sort of getting a side benefit from them. Now, take for example these two flowers. In visible light, this is what the flowers look like, and they're pretty and everything, but when you look at them in UV, that's a very different look. Now bees, the main pollinators of both of these kinds of plants, have better vision in the ultraviolet spectrum as well as the visible light spectrum, so the adaptations of those flowers are more like bullseyes. They're very attractive, but they're also sort of guiding the pollinator to do the job that the plant benefits the most from, which is to have the plant have reproduction because of the bee, the mutualist. Now this is different from pollination. Again, pollination is reproduction, but once reproduction has happened, there's some sort of fruit set. So when a plant makes a fruit, it typically makes a fruit that's both protective of the seeds, but also basically offers a bribe for some mutualists. So what's happening here in this kind of crude drawing, but also very informative drawing, is that lots and lots of animals, birds and monkeys and elephants, etc., are eating the fruit, the benefit of the mutualism that they have with the plants. And so they get food. That fruit is packaged in a whole bunch of carbohydrates and sugars. It's a natural form of food. Now, why does the plant make that food? Well, sure, it benefits the mutualism, but it's really a bribe. It's offering something so that the mutualist that it shares this fruit with is going to give the plant a benefit. And the benefit is, for the herbivore, or the frugivore in this case, somebody that eats fruit, the frugivore eats the fruit, but then, like this elephant does, walks away and then poops that seed out somewhere. If you look at a lot of these, what's happening is the seeds are being dispersed in the feces of the elephant or the monkey or whatever. So the benefit to the animal that is eating the fruit, the frugivore, is that they get food. The benefit to the plant is being dispersed away from the mother plant, so there's fewer competitors, and they're also being dispersed in a nice, well-fertilized package of elephant poop. There are also mutualisms that involve defense. So here we have an aphid, which is kind of like a mosquito except for plants. They drink the phloem, which is the sugary substance that plants make that carries the products of photosynthesis, phloem, photosynthesis. The plant is making a whole bunch of sugars, and the aphid taps into those phloem cells, and then they're sucking those juices. But what happens is the aphid will often get attacked by predators. The ants in this case are not predators, instead they're mutualists. They're mutualists of the aphids. The aphids poop out this little sugary substance known as honeydew. When aphids are processing a whole lot of plant liquids that carry products of photosynthesis, the sugar is nice and it's good energy and everything, but they're processing a lot of that and trying to get at some amino acids and proteins, etc. Now, when they do that, they have to poop out a lot of that excess sugar, and to the ants, that's delicious. And what happens is the ants basically farm and protect all of these aphids that are releasing a lot of honeydew, this sugary nectar, and the aphids benefit by having these very aggressive ants which are protecting them from other predatory insects. So if we're thinking about currency, the aphid gets higher survival by being protected. The ant offers a defense, and they offer that defense in return for food. Some of these defenses are facultative. Facultative means that one party can benefit from having this mutualism, but it doesn't need that mutualism. So here's an example of a singing caterpillar. I'll post a link on the Moodle page to video of the singing caterpillar. They actually don't sing. They make these little scrapey noises that convinces these ants to take care of it. So in this case, the caterpillar could do fine without the ants, but the benefit to the caterpillar is that the ants will protect them from parasitoids like these guys. What the ant gets out of this is that the caterpillar secretes substances that are rich in proteins and sugars, and so the ant gets food and the caterpillar gets defense. And the singing part comes in because the caterpillar can recruit ants from a ways away because it makes a sound that the ants can hear. Pretty cool. This is an example of not a facultative interaction, but an obligate interaction, an obligate mutualism. It's also a trophic mutualism because the two species that are involved both sort of get food from it. In this case, lichen is made up of two different kinds of things. There are algae, which form the upper and lower layers of the lichen, and then in the middle layer, this gray looking material here is actually fungi. So the fungus gets resources, products of photosynthesis that come from the algae, and the algae benefit because the fungus releases these enzymes that break up things that the algae can use in the production of photosynthesis. So both parties are benefiting, both parties get essentially food or components of food, so it's a trophic mutualism. Both of these species absolutely need each other to be around, so this is an obligatory or an obligate mutualism. Without the other parties cannot exist. Here are some examples of obligate mutualisms. I'm not going to ask you to remember each of these names, but you've probably seen these kind of obligate mutualisms exhibited in lichen all over the place. Lichen are pretty common, and it's pretty amazing that there's multiple species, or at least two species, involved in each one of these examples here. All of them obligate mutualisms. There's another really interesting obligate mutualism that happens in the tropics. We don't have this happen around here, but these are leafcutter ants. These ants are not really herbivores. They don't eat plant material. Instead, they eat fungus. And so what they do is they cut little pieces of leaves and then they take it down underground to where this fungus is, and this huge fungus grows and grows and grows, and the plants eat the bits of the fungus that bud off and grow. So the ants are constantly feeding the fungus and cultivating it like they're farmers, and the fungus is constantly being fed by the ants. The fungus cannot exist without these leafcutter ants, and because the only thing that these ants ever eat is fungus, the ants cannot live without the fungus. Another great example of an obligate mutualism. Fungi are involved in lots of mutualisms, actually. Fungi are pretty powerful and amazing on their own, but they're also associated with lots and lots of other species. Most of the mushrooms that you see are fruiting bodies of mycorrhizal species of fungi. Now, some of these species are poisonous, some of these are edible, some of them are just stinky and gross. But what do we mean when we say mycorrhizae? Mycorrhizae, that word comes from rhiza, which means the rooting zone of the plant, and myco, which means fungus. So these are fungi that are associated with the rooting zone of plants. In the picture on the right, you see a pine seedling that has a whole bunch of mycorrhizal fungi associated with the roots. This part is root. Everything else beyond that is all mycorrhizal fungus. Now what happens is the fungus helps in mineral absorption, sometimes absorption of water, to the plants. And what does the plant have to offer the fungus? What benefit does the fungus get? The fungus gets products of photosynthesis. Pretty much whenever a plant is involved, it's either going to be able to provide fruit or some other kind of product of photosynthesis, sugars. The picture on the left shows a very simple experiment that someone did. They grew a plant both with and without mycorrhizal interactions, and you can see the benefit. The plant grows much, much better, resists drought better, sometimes even is better at resisting herbivores than without the mycorrhiza. The final mutualism that I'm going to mention seems a little bit like mycorrhiza, but it's a little bit different. Again, it's between plants, but this time the other party in the mutualism is mutualist bacteria known as Rhizobia or rhizobial bacteria. This happens in a lot of plants that are in the legume family, so think peas and beans and things like that. There are these little nodules that house loads and loads of these bacteria, and what the bacteria do is they take nitrogen that's in the air, and there's nitrogen in the air in the soil as well, that is otherwise unavailable to these plants. These bacteria take the nitrogen that's in the air, turn it into a form that the plants can use, and then the plants can grow, reproduce a lot more, survive better, grow faster, etc. So the plant gets better growth, better fitness, better reproduction. What does the rhizobial bacteria get? Again, products of photosynthesis, plus a place to sort of live and reproduce, which is in these little nodules. So we've talked about several different kinds of interactions. We've talked about mutualisms, parasitisms, and commensalisms. And I hope that you'll see that there's kind of a sliding scale in between all of these different categories. What you have to keep track of is, does one party benefit, is it harmed, or is there no impact? And if you can keep track of that for both parties that are involved, you can start to see the world in a very different way, involving lots and lots of different kinds of species interactions.